when they start to make decisions for her, she realizes that having people make decisions for you can be tough, because you don't always agree with what they say. What they say is not always fun, and sometimes, like when they told her she should, in fact, try out for the rugby team, it can be hazardous to your health to have someone else make your decisions for you. It was a really, really fun book to write. One of my favorite parts about writing it, Brooklyn is a character that really came to life for me. She's very different from me, so it was really fun to write her. And she became so real that I would be out not writing, and she would kind of come to me and she would say something in my head, or I would see something and I would say, oh, Brooklyn would love that. Or I would be writing and she would kind of write through me, and something would come on the page, and I would laugh out loud at what she said. I don't take any credit for it. I swear there's some ghost coming through me here. Maybe it's Riley. I can hear it now. Anyways, she was just so fun to write, and I really missed her at the end. But my favorite part is when she actually writes her blog posts in this, because they are when she is at her truest form, because she is pleading to her blog readers, and I get to kind of, through the rest of the book, I write as her. On the blog post, I write as she would write when she's asking for help, and that was really interesting to kind of write through her mind.
That is interesting. I've heard her speak a lot of times, but that's a new tidbit for me.
Well, that was for you, Jessica.
Yes, thank you. Is this microphone on, by the way?
Yeah.
I was fiddling with it. I wasn't sure.
Actually, not half the room dismissed it.
Yes, but you're all nodding so politely. So. The funny thing is, I would rather be asked my weight. I'd rather have like my head shaved bald than have to synopsize any one of my books for you. So I normally tell people you can read the synopsis on the inside flap, and you can actually. Oh God, this is the hard part. It takes place in a semi-distant future New York where chocolate is illegal, and the main character is Anya Balanchine, who is actually I have some notes because I always forget what the book's about. I don't You know, really this brings up a larger problem, which is when you're writing a book, it's about like everything, and then you have to get to the end and say, but actually no, it's only about these three things that are going to be in the front, and hopefully, you know, that will be enough to make you want to read the rest. But anyway, for me, what the book is about is it's how your last name, the name you're born with in life, can lead people to make assumptions about you, and that really is the thing. And I know that when I start a book, I have a question in mind, and for this book, the question I was asking myself was, can we ever overcome the circumstances of our birth? And really, the whole series, this is the first in a series, is called Birthright, and that's what the book is about. It's an organized crime family saga, as I said before. I've always loved organized crime movies, like The Godfather or The Sopranos, but the thing that always bothered me about them was that the women characters are always basically wives, daughters, or hookers. So I wanted to write an organized crime story that was about a girl's rise to power, and that's really what the book is about for me.
Gabrielle and Mary, your books are both set in the future. How did you go about researching these future worlds? Did you research what was happening in technology or things that are in our contemporary society as you envisioned they might unfold in the future? Or what? Can you tell us a little bit about your process?
Yeah, sure. My book, like Mary's first book, is only set in the not her first book period, but the first book in the Jenna Fox series is only set in the semi-distant future. The first thing I'll tell you about is the date, which is 2082. Although I think it says 2083 in Mary's place, but it's actually 2082. Somebody said something applause-worthy over there. I chose 2082 for many reasons, one of which was my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and she was getting really, really sick and old. And sometimes when I would look at her, I would think, how is it possible that we ever get that old, where we're just like an old woman in a bed? So I wanted to write the age of the grandmother character in this story to be the same age as my grandmother, to be the same age as a 16-year-old, geez, I'm saying this wrong. She's born in 1995, which should be the same age as a 16-year-old reader reading this book. So I kind of want you to have the shock of thinking someday I will be really, really old. But in terms of approaching the future, this is not a dystopia, although people seem to like to say dystopia a lot these days. What it really is, because there isn't a cataclysmic event of any kind, there really isn't an apocalypse, and there say government control. Really, the way I imagined the future was if things got a little bit worse each year as opposed to a little better. And so then you take 80 years forward, and this is what happens if we stop funding the arts and the parks, if we don't fund new technologies, so it's kind of all these ifs that end up into a future that isn't terribly different than this one in any way. And also in terms of writing the future, this book is in a first-person point of view, not a third-person point of view. So everything in it is a character writing from the future. So I never wanted her to explain the world to you as if she was explaining the past. So it was kind of a different approach, I think, from many future worlds. I think of, like, there's a quote by Peter Weir's movie, The Truman Show, and it says, "We accept the world with which we've been presented." And that was my take for writing this future world. So
I think the cataclysmic event is when chocolate becomes illegal.
well, for you maybe. Jessica, it's not bread. If it were bread, then I would be in serious trouble. But it's just chocolate. I can live with that. Yeah.
I agree. In The Adoration of Jenna Fox, I never really say what the date is because I didn't want to, I just wanted the reader to imagine. But in my mind, it was about 50 years in the future. And so the way I went about researching it is because I had some new medical technology that was in it. And a lot of people think like I'm totally like a computer scientific nerd or something, and I'm not. I just like to read about anything. And so I go to the library, and it's also, when you're a writer, researching is a really good procrastination tool. So I researched and researched, and I knew that my character was going to be surviving due to some new medical technology. And so I went to the library, looked at all these journals, what is the latest thing that scientists are doing out there. And actually, they were doing way wackier things than even I had thought that they would be doing. So I would take whatever that was on the horizon and I would bump it up a little bit, just to push it a little bit farther. But even as I was doing it, for instance, in The Adoration of Jenna Fox, we have our first woman president. Yeah. And because I thought it was something that's very long overdue. But then as in the course of writing it, Hillary Clinton got into the race, and I thought, oh dear, we may have a first woman president before my book even hits the shelves. So I again had to bump it up a little bit farther, and I made it the second woman president. So, but it still hasn't happened. Anyhow, so that's what I did, is I just found out where things were, and I pushed it a little bit farther. And so in The Adoration of Jenna Fox, a lot of this stuff, I know it sounds far-fetched, but it's not that far from being a reality. And then with the Fox inheritance, that's like 310 years in the future. Again, back to the library, doing more research. And there's actually scientists out there that have everything mapped out, like when we will land on the moon, land on Mars, when we'll have colonies, when we will have computers that, it's actually been estimated that we will have computers that can scan our brains so that our entire minds are inside a computer by the year 2035. So they're actually sooner than what I had in my book. So everything is based on what's happening, things that I read, and then I pushed it a little bit farther. One thing I sort of backed off on, I had written an article about this monster volcano in Yellowstone that's overdue to blow. And it's going to be such a cataclysmic event. It erupts every 640,000 years, something like that. And I think it's 40,000 years overdue. The explosion will be so cataclysmic, it will send Earth into a perpetual winter and wipe off humans off the face of the Earth. Well, I didn't want that to happen in my book, so I made it so that it only it's more of a minor explosion. It causes a lot of death in the world, but we're still around. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a story.
Okay, I have a note to myself.